Hey guys, welcome back. Today on The Untidy Artist, I'm showing you how I make sourdough bread. Now, first of all, I am not a professional baker. I am not a sourdough expert. I made a lot of bread during the COVID quarantine, and this is what I found worked best for me. I gave a lot of starts to a lot of friends and family, and I had a lot of them asking me how I made my bread. And after trying to hold my phone while making it and taking pictures and trying to explain it, I just thought it would be easier to make a video. So this is for family and friends to see how I make my bread, and anyone else that wants to know a good method for sourdough bread making. You will find the recipe I use as well as tons of useful information below in the description of the video. There are a couple different tutorials that I found super helpful. I don't follow their recipes or the way that they do it exactly, but I did use some of their methods, so I will link both of those below. And with that said, let's make some bread. I have broken this down into 4 separate videos. The first video, I'll be showing you how to make the bread. The second video goes into more information about how to feed your start and take care of your start. Then there's a video about how to shape the bread and how to bake the bread. So I will put links to all 4 of those videos below in the description of the video as well. Okay, the first thing we're gonna go over is the tools you need to make the bread. I use a kitchen scale and I weigh everything in grams. This kitchen scale is awesome. It's not expensive. I got it on Amazon, and I actually use the same type of scale in my craft room. I would highly recommend weighing by grams. You're going to get a better result in the bread. Then I like mixing mine in a glass Pyrex bowl. This size works really well. I'll list below in the description exactly the bowl that I'm using, but it's nice because you can see on the sides how your bread is progressing. I have a spoon from my kitchen and a spatula. You'll need a recipe. I'll be using a recipe based off of the recipe from Tartine, the famous sourdough restaurant in San Francisco. You'll need some flour. The recipe calls for 900 grams of bread flour and 100 grams of whole wheat flour. I'll be honest, I couldn't find bread flour or wheat flour during the shutdown, and so I just used all-purpose flour and it worked lovely. I will say that after finally getting some bread flour, it is my preferred type of flour to use. I get it from a local mill, so it's nice and fresh. And what I guess I'm trying to say is you can use all-purpose flour in this recipe and it will turn out. But if you can find bread flour, do that. And if you want to add the 100 grams of the wheat flour, it turns out even better. You'll need some salt. I like to use sea salt, and you'll need some water. And then obviously you'll need your sourdough start. I do go into a lot more detail about the sourdough start in part 2 of this series. So there will be a link for that below in the description of the video. And you can see that this sourdough start is nice and healthy and bubbly, and we're ready to go. So first step, put your bowl on your scale and tare it or zero it out so it accounts for the weight of the bowl. Then you're going to measure in 700 grams of warm water. So not hot, not cold, just lukewarm. Then I'm going to put in 200 grams of my start. Just scoop it in there. Once again, I go into more detail about the start, give you lots more information in that next video. So once I have that measured in, I'm going to take it off the scale, and then using my hands, I'm going to gently start breaking it apart. Now, my recipe said to use a whisk, which I tried doing, and it just ends up that all of the sourdough start gets stuck in the whisk, and I end up using my hands anyway to get the start off the whisk. So I just use my hands, and you just gently break up that sourdough start into the water. And it does take maybe a minute, and then I like to use the tips of my fingers to kind of whisk it. What you want to go for by the time you're finished is the foamy, frothy part on the top of the water, and you just don't want any big pieces of the start that you can still feel in the water. Okay, so we're all set. We're ready for the next step. Now you're going to grab your scale, put the bowl back on the scale, and tare it so you're accounting for all of the weight in the bowl. Now you're going to measure in a total of 1,000 grams of flour. I'm going to put 1,000 grams of bread flour into my bowl. This is the part where if you wanted to use wheat flour, you would put 900 grams of your regular flour in and 100 grams of the wheat flour. Once I have that all measured in, I'm going to take my bowl back off of my scale and I'm gently going to start mixing the flour into the water. Now, once again, I'm using my hands. And I'm just slowly stirring the liquid into the flour. The goal with this step is to hydrate our flour. So we want all of the flour to start absorbing the water. And you're going to do this by gently pressing it together and mixing it together. And it does look like a big hot mess of stickiness, but I promise this turns into a beautiful loaf of bread. So I just keep mixing it until I don't have any more big lumps of flour in my bread. I'll lift it up, flip it over, and you can lift it up and even see on the bottom if you still have some flour that hasn't been mixed in. And I just keep kind of pinching it and stirring it with my hands. And you can see there's a little bit of flour left there until it's all worked in. And you can see it's a big sticky mess. But if you like getting your hands dirty, this part's fun. Okay, once I have it mixed together, I'm gonna grab my spatula. This part is optional. You could just try and kind of smooth it out with your hands a little bit, but I like using the spatula to scrape down the sides. It gives me less dried dough on the side of my bowl that I have to worry about cleaning out later. So I just scrape it down, kind of pat my dough into the beginning of a shape of some sort. And now we're going to let our dough rest. We want the flour to continue absorbing the water, so I put a tea towel over mine and then I put it somewhere warm. I like putting mine in my oven with the oven turned off, of course, and then I let it set for anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. Once that step is done, you're going to take off your tea towel, and this is what we have. Now we're going to add our salt in. We're going to put 50 grams of water in and 20 grams of salt. So this is my sea salt, and I'm measuring in 20 grams of salt, and it always feels like it's so much salt, but in actuality, it's only 4 teaspoons. So that's 2 teaspoons per loaf of bread, because this recipe makes 2 loaves. Then slowly pour over the 50 grams of water. I like to pour the water directly over the salt because it helps the salt to start dissolving. Now, the whole purpose of this step is to get that salt mixed into our dough. So you slowly want to start pressing it into the dough and then start pinching it until you can feel those granules of salt starting to dissolve into the dough. Now, the reason that we wait to add the salt is because salt draws moisture out of things. And where our first step was to get the flour fully hydrated, we didn't want to add the salt at that point because it would have made the flour not completely absorb the water. So I'm just going to continue to use my hands to pinch the dough to see if those granules of salt have dissolved and to really get that dough mixed together. This part should take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. These first 2 steps with making the sourdough bread are definitely the most time consuming. After this, we're going to let our bread rest and we're going to do what's called a stretch and fold. So once I have that all combined and I can't feel any more of the salt, I'm going to grab my spatula and once again just get everything off the edges of the bowl and kind of smooth it out a little bit. Then I'm going to grab my tea towel and I'm going to let it sit somewhere warm. Once again, I'm putting it in my oven with my oven turned off. And the first time I do it for 45 minutes, you can do it anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. So after 45 minutes, this is what my dough looks like. So now our dough has entered into what's called the bulk fermentation process. And all we're going to do is stretch our dough and fold it over 4 to 5 times. So the best way to do this is dip your hands in some water first. Totally forgot on this first part, but I do use water in the next steps you'll see. So I'm just pulling the dough gently out from underneath and folding it over itself. Then I'm going to put the tea towel back on it and I'm going to let it rest once again, anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And now this is the second time we're going to do the stretch and fold. So now I'm using water, which makes it much easier. So just dip your hands in the water. It helps the dough not stick to your hands. And I'm reaching from underneath and I'm pulling that dough out and folding it over itself. So I'm just folding towards the middle. And then I rotate my bowl and I do it again. And like I said, you can do anywhere from 4 to 5 folds each time. You'll definitely notice the dough getting smoother and smoother each time you do the stretch and fold. And once I have it done the second time, exact same steps as last time. I'm just going to take my tea towel, put it over my bread, and set it somewhere warm. And we will continue doing this step. You can do it anywhere from 4 to 5 times. I usually do mine about 5 times, so I'm setting my timer for 30 minutes. And this is our third stretch and pull. So you can start to see some bubbles in your bread. It's getting nice and aerated. And we're going to stretch and fold. So you can start to see some of those beautiful air bubbles in your dough, which means you had a healthy start and your bread is on the right track. So cover it with a tea towel, and you guessed it, let it rest for 30 to 45 minutes. And we're just going to continue doing these steps. So here's our fourth stretch and pull, and you'll see more of the bubbles, and you'll also notice your dough getting smoother. And once again, let your dough rest anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And now for our final stretch and fold. And this is exactly what we want our dough to look like. You can see that it's nice and aerated. There are bubbles starting to pop up through the dough. And I like using the Pyrex dish because you can look on the side and see your dough is nice and aerated. And this is going to be our final stretch and fold. And then once again, I'm going to set it aside for 30 to 45 minutes, and then I'm going to shape my dough. I have a video entirely dedicated to how I shape my dough, and I will put a link to that below in the description of the video. You'll also find the video that covers the sourdough start and also how to bake your bread. So all 4 of those videos will be below in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next part of this series.